This is the School Leadership Show, the only podcast dedicated to helping practicing and aspiring school leaders improve their craft. The School Leadership Show brings together thought leaders from inside and outside of education to deliver you the insights and tools you need to succeed in school leadership. I found Dan Rockwell's blog, Leadership Freak, through the Marshall Memo, and now I'm hooked. His short but powerful blog posts have become part of my daily routine. During this conversation, Dan and I talk about the origin of the blog and his ongoing work with leaders through workshops, seminars, and individual coaching sessions. Here are a couple of notes from his website just to reinforce what a big deal he is. Inc. Magazine Top 50 Leadership and Management Expert and Top 100 Great Leadership Speakers. American Management Association Top 30 Leader in Business of 2014. And according to the Center for Management and Organization Effectiveness, the Leadership Freak blog is the most socially shared leadership blog on the internet. Dan and I go deep on some big leadership concepts, and we get granular with very practical strategies for being a better leader. I love this time with Dan, and I made him promise me a part 2. You can reach Dan through his blog at leadershipfreak.blog or by Google searching Leadership Freak. Enjoy this conversation with Dan Rockwell. So I'm here with Dan Rockwell. Hi, Dan.
Hi.
Thanks for joining us today on the School Leadership Show. Dan is the creator and purveyor of Leadership Freak, and we're going to talk about that website and all things Leadership Freak in a second, but I kind of wanted to give people a sense of how I found you. And I actually found Leadership Freak, stumbled upon you through Kim Marshall and the Marshall Memo. And Kim and I, when I record the audio version of the Marshall Memo, sometimes we'll correspond back and forth about some of the individual things that he's written about. And lately we've been commenting on a lot of Dan Rockwell content.
Wow, that's fantastic.
So you want to tell folks a little bit about Leadership Freak and sort of your approach and what you're working on?
My approach and what I'm working on. Those are great questions. Let me see. First of all, my approach is to listen to what is frustrating to me, what I'm talking with my coaching clients, emails that I receive. I received 3 emails this afternoon with what would you think about this? What would you think about that? Books. A great book for me is a book that helps me think my own ideas. So I'm jotting down notes, and that's where those ideas come from. How's that?
That's good. That makes sense. And you do, your tagline on your website is 300 words at a time.
Yes.
So say more about that. Why 300 words? Where'd that come from?
Yeah, great question. So look, I'm doodling around. I think now it's about 8 years ago. I worked for the local Penn State affiliate at the time. And I guess it would be before that. Maybe this was 10 years ago. But anyway, I'm doodling around with this whole Leadership Freak thing. I'm thinking about a blog, and just because I want to. And the freak thing comes from like sports fanatic, freakish, that kind of thing. That's where that comes from. And everything you see on the blog is designed to please what I want to see. It's really for me. And so I have a short attention span. I do not like reading long articles online. So 300 words, that's about 2 minutes. That's about what I have in me. And by the way, when you look at the page, I actually designed it so that the reason for the headings and the highlights and all that is you can scan down the page and say, yeah, that's interesting. And then you can go up and read it. Or because this is what I do. Right? I scan the page and I make a decision. Do I want to read it or not? So I want to help you. I am not trying to trick you into staying longer. If you look at it and you say, that's not for me today, click off, I'm totally happy with that. If you scan it, and you say, oh, interesting, I'll read the whole thing. Then I succeeded there too. So 300 words is because I have a short attention span.
And I love it. And I love how you said you owned it. You're writing for you and what works for you and the things that frustrate you, which is ultimately, I think, ends up being some of the best content because you're not writing for somebody else.
Right. Exactly. I think this is where the idea of authentic leadership, comes in. How do I bring my best self And so often what that means is I'm trying to solve my own problems. I'm trying to kind of work through, one of the reasons why I have a lot to write about is I've just screwed up leadership so much for so long that, I got a big bucket of stuff I can reach into and then come up with other things. Plus, there are just so many smart people in the world. These kind of conversations that I'm having with you, I find very stimulating. I might jot a note or two down, and sometime in the next day or two, something will come of that, and I'll write about it.
Oh, super cool. So you mentioned that, you get ideas from writing from frustrations that you experience, things that you're talking about with your coaching clients. And even, I imagine, things that you see when you're out speaking, doing keynotes, workshops. What are some of the themes or trends that you're noticing these days in your work that kind of keep coming up?
Well, the things that keep coming up are really universal. I'm struggling with my boss. How do I get my boss to pay attention? Some form of, I have a lousy leader. Can you help me make them a better leader? And in a way, you can't, but in another way, it's like, this is your opportunity to thrive. So those questions come up a lot. I think, what's so exciting about what I'm doing is I working with leaders, you help them come to see their own heart. They're so busy doing, strategizing, techniques. Dan, give me some skills and, tell me what I should do about this. And I like to do a little bit about that, but really what I like to think about with them is, where is this coming from and why does this matter to you? And what does your best self look like? I've had 2 conversations before this one. It's really about bring your best self. And so often, I guess Bill George, right? He's the True North guy. Mm-hmm. He's, maybe at the heart, he's not he's not the only one, but he's sort of like at the heart of this whole authentic leadership thing. And I love to see this. I also think coaching is a trend. I don't know if it's going to, I hope it hangs on. I think it's great. Millennials love coaches. I get questions about how to deal with millennials and all of that kind of stuff. That's another issue that comes up, I guess. Yeah.
All right. So, you gave me a lot to work with there. Nice job. So how about let's go back into that last one. So dealing with millennials. So I'm 43 years old, and I'm often working with millennials in public school and public education. So when people say, "Oh, how do you deal with millennials?" And I feel like every generation does that, right? They always go back and say, "How do you deal with so and so?" So what do you tell people?
Well, just on the coaching thing, the number one thing that millennials want is a coach as a leader. That's I think Gallup came up with that, and there's some other research on this. Google as well. The coaching manager, the coaching leader. That's because they want to learn, they want to get ahead, they want to figure out what's, how they can grow. And this is a big thing for millennials, right? If you've been in the workforce for 20 or 30 years, you're really not interested in growing. You just want to ride it out to the end.
Yep.
But these young folk that are in the marketplace right now, they want to learn, they want to grow. Yeah, everybody complains about their issues, right? They don't want to work hard, and they float from here. They got an attention span of a chipmunk on steroids, and you know what I'm saying. But they definitely do want to grow. They want to learn. They will respect a leader who helps them get where they want to go. And so the issue then becomes aligning where they want to go with organizational goals. When you bring those things together, then you kind of tap the fire of a millennial.
So, and that's your coaching of leaders of millennials, is to try to help them line those 2 things up.
That's part of that. It's interesting you bring that up, because I would say half of my coaching is about how to coach the people on your team. And so I directly coach leaders, but then there are other leaders who want to learn how to coach their people. And I'll tell you what, a really high energy, aggressive leader, I don't mean aggressive in a bad way, but, a really driven leader finds it very, very difficult to pull back and make space for someone to grow and learn and, try and experiment and maybe fail, at least not in serious ways, but fail and learn and try again. Those things are really tough for active, let's get her done kind of leaders.
Well, and I think that's borne out in all that we're seeing recently on the power of failure and failing fast and failing forward and all those, that idea of, and I feel like, I don't know if it's my generation of Gen Xers who, is it us that we were never allowed to fail. We all got the trophies, and so it just expected.
The millennials are the trophy people.
Trophy people.
Yeah.
So you mentioned a little bit earlier about helping people get to know themselves as leaders, and what do you recommend, or how do you coach people through a process to really understand where their strengths are, where their areas of need are?
Yes. There are several strategies or techniques for this. One of the most surprising things about self-awareness and self-knowledge is that it takes other people to help us know ourselves. This is not about sitting under a tree in the lotus position humming. It's really about getting feedback, good feedback, and this is really tough for leaders. People are not going to tell them the truth. So, and that's where I come in. I can have a conversation with you as a coaching client, and I can say, gee, I don't know, when you started talking, my energy just drained out of my body, man. I don't know what's going on for you, but this is not working. And nobody else is going to say that. And they actually pay me to do this, right? So
that's great.
Yeah, but I think so. Good, honest feedback. I think there's a typical coaching tool called the Lifeline, where you ask somebody to map out their life in segments, and there's a line through the paper, and what are those memories that are above the line and memories that are below the line.
Yep.
And you sort of what are those really low points, what are those really high points. What's so interesting is it's the low points that form us, and this is so exciting. When we think about, I've written about purpose and a lot, and really purpose comes through pain. It's not about passion and excitement and woohoo. It's really social workers, right? What their history is they came from rough families, right? And what are they doing? They're bringing their purpose comes from that struggle. So I think part of it, the Lifeline story thing, and you know what? You just have somebody in your life who you give permission to say because I'll tell you, when I see it happen, and I do, you can see it happen. You see that sort of that inner energy come out. They light up. You can feel the power of it. And I'll say, ho, 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 what's going on for you right now? Because this is it. And give them a chance to reflect, on what's happening. Versus, this is a public person, blah, blah, blah. We got to do this and make sure everything's in order and everything has to look right. And all of that, we lose ourselves. By the way, I'm not for I'm having a bad day today. Life sucks. You know what I mean? I'm not for that sort of,
right.
That sort of indulgence. But anyway.
No, that totally makes sense. And it's interesting just to listen to you talking, to hear your passion in getting into really what makes people tick. And I can see the storyteller in you, which it makes sense from your background in ministry. So I was really curious to see that. Was that purposeful? How did that evolve?
My coach, I believe in coaching, and I have a coach. And my coach was the first person. We were delivering some coaching training for, actually it was in a school system in Denver. And he said, you're a storyteller. And I never really thought about it. But this is another way where we touch base with who we really are and our passion. And I'll give you an exercise on this. I do this with, you can do this. I did this in Iowa just the other day, the 1,600 people. Tell the person sitting beside you a story about yourself, any story, a happy story, sad story, vacation, school, whatever, any story. So they tell the story, and then the other person tells them a story. You can't use the word I. You can ask them a question or two, but you can't say I, and just a question or two. And this only takes 2 or 3 minutes. And then what they say to each other is, after I hear your story, I say, your story makes me think you might be really good at. Now, I could be wrong, but your story makes me think you care a lot about details, or being able to make up your own decisions means a lot to you. And as you share the stories, and then people reflect back and forth. I actually was in a governmental organization in Oregon. I had them tell each other stories, and they were listening, and then they gave the feedback. And honest to goodness, don't tell anybody this, there were actually tears in the room. Some people were so touched by being heard and understood.
Wow.
It was so unusual for them. So yeah, I believe in stories, and it's touched a purpose. And I think it also, there's a lot of fuel there. There's a lot of energy when someone hears your story or when you can tell your story.
Well, and I think you touched on something really important. I think it's just giving people the opportunity to be vulnerable and tell their story in a safe place, which we don't take time to do that. It's go, go, go. It's accomplish the next thing. And I think we ignore that softer side at our peril.
Yeah, wow. This is so true. One of the great gifts a leader can give the people on the team is say, come on in for a one-on-one and just say, well, what are you learning? What's working for you? I remember working with a management team. They said, it's a dark culture around here. And they designed this question. They would start asking the people on their team, what's working? And so I went back the next month. We had a debrief. I said, so what are you learning? And they said, we're learning that we've had people working here for 10 or 15 years, and this is the feedback they give us. No one has ever asked us what's working. Everybody's always problem. There's no time to think about what's working, what's really floating my boat. If you give people just a few minutes to reflect on their journey, and then they retouch with their energy and their passion and their purpose, that's a gift if you can do that as a leader.
Well, and if you think about what we know about psychological priming, right? If we're always opening with and focusing on the negative, we're going to get more of that. But if you get in there with what is working, and I feel like I've watched leaders enter new systems or transition into new roles, and I would say the ones who enter in with that deficit mindset, that everything's wrong, I got to fix this, and charge ahead that way, are often less successful than the ones who go in with okay, let's talk about what's working here.
Yeah. Carol Dweck's book, Growth Mindset, right? I mean, this is so fantastic. This is, not what's, how do we learn? I think the question is, when someone makes a mistake, what are you learning? Versus, oh, shame on you. You're going to get a D on this. It's like. Yeah.
Well, and that's the argument I make all the time is that, if one of the folks that I supervise produces something that isn't at the level that I need it to be, I don't give them a C. I have them go do it again with feedback.
Yeah. One of the great questions in that context is, well, how could we take this to the next level? It's not it doesn't have to focus on what's wrong. It's like, okay, here's where I love starting where people are and accepting that.
Yep.
And then say, how do we get to the next level? I love to start meetings. I have a Wednesday morning meeting, and I start the meeting, we talk about what's working. And then the next question is, what could we do better? Not how did we screw up? There's a huge difference.
There really is.
What can we do better?
Even just framing it that way it takes the sting out of it too, and the blame, which is interesting. So I want to take a second, and if you would think about some of the. And again, I want to talk about positive things, but I'm going to go negative for a second here. If you think about what are some of the biggest, maybe we won't frame it as mistakes, but perhaps growth areas that you notice with new leaders. Where do you really see, you folks entering maybe a management position for the first time? It's their first time leading a team in a formalized positional kind of way. Where do you find you're having to do the most course corrections for folks in that situation?
Okay, so I'm glad you narrowed that to let's think about people who are entering into a position like management or leadership for the first time.
Yeah.
That's a great context to be in. And I suppose a very common concern is I don't have all the answers and the need to have all the answers. This is so much stress for these young leaders. And there's a way to seek feedback and input and sound like a leader versus ooh, do you like me? What are we going to do? Kind of like insecure way.
Right.
But I think the need to have all the answers and give all the solutions is probably one of the big mistakes of young leaders.
So how do we help them get past that?
Yeah. So, especially young leaders, we talk about humility, and we talk, I would want to work with you on humility, and then we would say, who start asking the question when someone asks you a question like, well, "What do you think we should do?" Learn a response like, well, who might know about this? Who's had experience on our team? And start to bring out the expertise on the team, get some responses from the team. Now, sometimes people need direction. It's one thing to say, this is what we're going to focus on. It's another thing to tell everybody what they're supposed to do and how they're supposed to do it. So I'm not for passive leadership necessarily, but being open. What's the answer to needing all the answers is being open to the wisdom that's on your team, and finding ways to draw that out.
I've seen people ask the question of the group or pose it in a way to say, gosh, we can't be the first people looking at this problem. There have to be some people out there who've experienced something like this before. And I was purposeful there. I didn't say that it's not me. I've said this before. It's I've heard other people do this. So trying to sort of take it away from it, particularly I find if you're the deck officer or you're the ranking person in the room, to try to deflect that a little bit so that people aren't trying to please you with what they're saying.
Very powerful, man. This is very powerful. And I think when you think if you're in a meeting setting, just watch the dynamic of the meeting. And if you're a new leader and everybody's head is turned toward you and everybody's talking to you, wrong. Help them talk to each other, right? Help them talk. And so one of the things to do would be say, well, hey, Bob, what do you think about what Mary just said? What's your feedback on this? And get them. And I think MIT came up with this. One of the features of a really high performing team is that they will send people out, like what you were saying. They will send people. Somebody must know how to do this. Exactly. Somebody's done this. Send them out, and they come back and they give a report. And then don't let anybody look at you and oh, that's wonderful, and you check it off. No, you say, Fred, what do you think of the report? What comes to your mind now? What do you think the next steps are? And get people talking to each other, not to you. See, you're the bottleneck if you do that. And young leaders, they kind of feel like they have to control too much and know too much.
Well, and I think it's folly to expect anybody to know everything. With as complex as everything is right now, that was Atul Gawande's whole point in the Checklist Manifesto, right? Was that there's no way everybody can know everything. Anybody can know anything. So you have to build in systems and protocols to kind of force people into those habits of not looking just at the head of the table, but really in a very effective way, not only listening, but then kind of poking one another.
Yes, yeah. You made me think about I will have teams go around the room and everybody will say, the thing that I admire most about you is this, and they'll just take turns, and so, hey, let's have 2 or 3 people say something about Mary, and then 2 or 3 people say something about Bob. The other thing I'll have teams do is finish the sentence, when I see you at your best. Now the reason for this, again, you don't want to put everybody on the spot and I hope I didn't sound like go around the room. So now it's you and everybody has to say something. No, 2 or 3 people will say something. But the idea would be that you create this energy in the room and respect for the strengths around the table. And now they can start having these very dynamic conversations with each other. They learn to trust each other.
Absolutely. What have you learned as you've worked with different teams over time? What are some of the sort of most, I guess, bang for your buck interventions? If you think of the most toxic groups that you've been brought into, and I would argue that there's a little bit of a bias there, because if they're bringing you in, they've probably got some potential, if they're even thinking that way. But if you think about some of the most real toxic and difficult groups that you've worked with, what are those early interventions to help build trust and to create that vulnerability that you found effective?
So here's the number one thing. Teams, especially dysfunctional teams, to steal a Pat Lencioni, 5 Dysfunctions of the Team thing. Yep. Go ahead and read that book. But I think teams don't work on how they work together. they do the work and they come together to do the work and they start right in doing the work, and that's the thing they do. And so take a few minutes in at the beginning of your meeting to work on the way you work or to work on the relationships around the table. You don't have to take a long time. It could be 5 or 10 minutes. It could be as simple as, okay, hey, I'm the person leading the team, leading this meeting, but my goal is to get you talking to each other. So at the end of this meeting, I would love for your feedback on what I did that helped you talk to each other and what I did that hindered you from talking to each other, or how I could be better at getting you talking to each other. But you're working on the way you work together. That's where the real beauty starts to happen. And most teams don't do that at all because they feel like they got so much to do they don't have time to work on the work.
Well, and I think there's an important piece of that I don't think we can overlook, because there implicitly in how you just described that situation, you as the leader or the facilitator put forth your own vulnerability by asking for feedback on how you could do it better or what hindered. And I think that doesn't always come naturally for people to put themselves out there to ask for that constructive and that growth producing feedback.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You make me think about model the way. Right, you got to, whatever you want from others, you got to model the way. Hey, people ask me, Dan, come in. We want you to do a workshop on accountability. We have to hold our people accountable. And so I'll say, okay, I'm going to come in and teach you how to help other people hold you accountable. How can you be accountable?
Right,
because you're going to model the way. It's like, oh well, maybe we need somebody else to do this.
So if you were going to, and I'm going to take us off on a little bit of a tangent here. So with the amount of content that you put out, and as busy as you are with consulting and workshops and keynotes and coaching and all that stuff, I mean, 450,000 subscribers. I mean, that's pretty impressive, Dan. What do you do personally to stay productive, to stay on track and cranking out everything that you do?
Yeah, a couple of things come to mind here. First of all, people often ask me, how do you get all this content out? And here's the basic rule of life is you cannot pour out more than you pour in. It's a very simple rule. You can't get anything out of an empty cup. So I have to be putting a lot of stuff into my cup. So I get a lot of books. I get books almost every day. I get books in the mail. And, I'm going to look through them. I'm not going to read them all, but I'm going to read some of them. I'm going to write in them. They're going to help me think my own thoughts. I'm going to fill my cup with books. I'm going to fill my cup with conversations like I'm having with you. I get to talk to a lot of smart people, and they get my juices flowing. Conversations help me. Struggles help me. I love to write angry. Now, when I say that, I don't want to post that, but at the beginning, I'm ticked about something and there's a lot of fire, there's a lot of passion. And then I turn it to, because anger tells you what you don't like. Okay, big boy, answer your frustration. And that's what gets put on the website. So I think, how do you get it out there? And the other thing I would say is the deadline. I try to get up early and get something out relatively early. If I'm on the West Coast, it's harder because, you got the time zone issues and, you got all kinds of wacky things going on. But, I do try to get things out early, and I pressure myself not to keep polishing it. Get it out there. 80% is good enough. And it has misspellings in it. And my wife texts me, hey, the grammar's not right here, the comma here. And if you catch it early, you will see a misspelling in the picture, or something, and somebody will let me know. So I do pressure I put a deadline out there. The last thing I'm going to say about this is gratitude. I find when my energy goes down, a lot of that has to do with just not being grateful for the opportunities. So like I said, I got 3 emails this afternoon, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? And honestly, I don't feel a need that I have to answer every single one of these. Sometimes I put them in post, and sometimes I just save it and nothing happens, and sometimes I write back. But you start to feel ungrateful for the opportunity. Oh, I got to get on an airplane again. I hate airplanes. You know what I mean? And it's true. I do. If I never get on an airplane again for the rest of my life, I'll be happy. But that would mean I would miss that opportunity to meet people and somewhere else, and give a presentation and be useful. So gratefulness, I'm finding, really helps keep my energy up. And when it starts to go down, I realize, who would not give their right arm for some of the opportunities that you have, Dan? You change your attitude and be thankful.
Dan, that is a perfect place for us to end. I want to be sensitive to your time, and that was absolutely spectacular. I felt like it was a sprint, but we got there. Now, where can people go to learn more about you and your work?
Yep. Well, if you go to Google and type in Leadership Freak, you can't miss it. Thankfully, I'm the only one. My email is dan@leadershipfreak.com. And thanks for that. Thanks for the chance to have a conversation with you. I so appreciate it.
Dan, I appreciate it. It was a great conversation, and maybe a part 2 at some point.
Absolutely.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the School Leadership Show, a podcast for aspiring and practicing school leaders. Send your comments, questions, and show ideas to me, Mike, at schoolleadershipshow.com. And please consider rating the podcast in iTunes and leaving a comment. And definitely pass the show along to your colleagues.